In this lesson, we're going to be going over basic wholesaling terms that you should know. Now, there's hundreds of wholesale terms that you will hear in the business. We're not going to go over all of those. But I put about 15 terms in here that you should absolutely know before jumping in. And that's what we're going to go over. So heading over into the slideshow, let's get into it. Now, the first term is a wholesaler. This is probably the most simple one because this is what you're going to be doing. A wholesaler is essentially you're just being the middleman between the seller and the buyer, and you're making a fee for connecting them together. The next term is ARV. You're going to hear this term a lot, and it's probably one of the most important terms that you can know as a wholesaler. What an ARV is, it's connected to a home, and the ARV means after repair value. This is the value of the home after it's repaired. So, meaning after it's flipped, updated, rehabbed, however you want to call it, this is how much the home will sell for after all that work has been done to it. A comp or a comparable. This pretty much backs up your ARV. Let's say you brought me a property. I can't just say it's worth $200,000. I need proof that it's worth $200,000. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go look in the area of other things that have been sold, also known as a comp or a comparable. I'm going to go find comps around that neighborhood of properties that are similar to that home and see what they sold for. So I can justify if that property is really worth $200,000 after it has been flipped. So when you bring a deal to a buyer and they say, "Hey, do you have any comps to justify this ARV?" This is what they're asking for. They're asking for other homes that have been sold. Next term, what is a title company? Title company, this is where all your transactions are going to be taking place. When you get a seller in contract and they sign and you sign, you're going to take this contract to a title company. The title company facilitates the transaction. They make sure everything is done correctly, and they're the ones that handle all the money and disbursements. On to the next term. Assign means assigning your rights over to your buyer. This is how you make your money. When you have the original purchase of contract with the seller with your name on it, how you legally sell the contract over to a buyer is this term called assigning or assigning. And you're going to send an assignment contract over to the buyer. And once you and the buyer sign the assignment, you legally assign your rights in that first contract with the seller over to the buyer. And you made that fee. Now, the title company will see this paper trail and they'll know exactly what happened. And they'll know that the buyer got the contract assigned over to them. Now, a double close is pretty simple. It's really what it says. And what a double close is, it's basically instead of assigning a contract to a buyer, you actually close on the property. So let's say I lock the seller in into a purchase agreement for like let's say $60,000. Instead of me assigning it to a buyer for $80,000 to make that $20,000 assignment, I'm going to close on the property and then I'm going to immediately sell it to the buyer for 80,000. So I'm going to make my profit still, but I actually owned the property for like 2 minutes and then I immediately sold it to the buyer. Why would I double close over a sign? It's because there's some states that actually don't allow assignments. Illinois, you have to have a license to assign contracts. So in a state like this, you would have to close on it first and then immediately sell it to the buyer. Let's say you're making $90,000 on the deal and you don't want the seller to see you're making that much money because they may freak out. You may just not want them knowing. In that case, you would double close because then they wouldn't really know what's going on after you bought the property. If you assigned it, then they would see the paper trail and they would see it on the HUD, seeing you're making that much money. So double closing and assigning, two different things, but it gets you the same result. Now, into the next term, closing costs. Every transaction has closing costs. This is how title companies make their money, and this is pretty much the fee to close with the title company, and it's usually about 2%. Most wholesalers will always negotiate buyer pays all closing costs. So let's say you're buying a property for $100,000. The closing costs you can expect to usually be about $2,000 of closing costs that you're going to pay on top of the 100,000. So at the end of the transaction, you'll probably be paying 102,000 instead of 100,000. The next term, joint venture slash JV. You'll hear this term a lot, and that's pretty much partnering on a deal with somebody. Let's say me and you were working together. I told you I'm going to get the deals, I'm going to lock them in contract, and I want you to dispo all these deals. And we're going to split these deals 50-50. There's some JVs I did where I closed the wholesaler's deal. I locked it in, I transaction coordinated it, I dispoed it, and we had a JV contract laying out everything I did, laying out the things that they did, and how much money will get paid out on this deal. That's essentially what a JV is. There's no set in stone percentages of how much each person gets in the JV. There could be 10 people on a JV, there could be 2 people on a JV. It just lets the title company know who to pay out. Because let's say there's a $10,000 assignment, the title company doesn't know who to pay that $10,000 assignment to unless there's a JV. So on the JV, let's say there's 5 parties involved, you're going to submit this JV to the title company and they'll know exactly what to do with the $10,000 assignment. They'll see, okay, party A gets 10%, party B gets 15, party C gets 30, and they'll disperse it as the following. JVs are really important, and make sure when you're doing deals with people, always have that JV signed. Now, daisy chain. You don't really need to know what daisy chain means, but I just felt like I should throw this in here because you always got to be aware of these. There's nothing bad with daisy chains, but a lot of people have a negative feeling towards the term daisy chain. And it's because wholesalers don't like to be transparent. All a daisy chain is let's say you have a buyer and I'm a wholesaler and I brought you a deal saying, hey John, I have a deal I need help dispoing. And you're like, oh sweet, I have a buyer, he's ready to go. And next thing you know, you found out I didn't even have the contract. It was somebody I knew that had the contract. And I didn't tell the person that I didn't have the contract. I was just kind of being a little shady and not being transparent. And this can get real confusing in the transaction when you don't know who the original contract holder is. So daisy chain is all it is somebody has a contract, they reach out to somebody for help, and then that person reaches out to somebody for help, and then that person reaches out to somebody for help, and it just becomes a huge chain. All this can be resolved if a deal is brought to you. Just say, "Hey, are you the original contract holder?" If not, I'm perfectly fine with it. So let's all get in a group chat so I can help you guys out, and we can be really transparent and have a direct line of communication. Maximum allowable offer. This is your bread and butter. This is how you make money. This is a term you need to know. Your maximum allowable offer is the max amount that you can offer a seller where the numbers make sense for you to make money. So let's say my maximum allowable offer, I calculated with the seller, it was $60,000. I can't go higher than that number. I know that's my golden number. And when I tell the seller, hey, I have to be at 60, I can't go any higher than that. Let's say my maximum allowable offer was 60,000. I'll offer the seller 50,000, 55,000 first because I know all my breathing room is I can go all the way up to 60, but no higher. We're going to go into how to calculate your maximum allowable offer, but this is your bread and butter. If you get this wrong, you don't make money. You have to know how to calculate these accurately. Going into the next term, an inspection period. These are going to be your best friend. This is how you don't lose a lot of money. This is how you don't get in trouble. And an inspection period, all it is, this is how much time you have to inspect the home and do your own due diligence before you make that firm commitment. And before you make that full commitment, obviously you didn't walk the property. Obviously, the buyer didn't walk the property. So what you put in the contract is what's called an inspection period. This period gives you a buffer time where you can walk the property, the buyer can walk the property, he can give you a firm answer if it's a go or not, and it gives you a back out reason within that period to tell the seller like, hey, this isn't going to work. Let's say you put $2,000 EMD down. This inspection period will actually save your EMD if you can back out before the inspection period is over. Once the inspection period is over, your EMD will go firm and it's no getting it back. The title company is going to send it to the seller. Make sure you always have an inspection period in your contracts. If you don't, make sure you know exactly what you're doing. COE, close of escrow, this is really simple. It's basically just when the property is going to close. That's simple. EMD. I just stated EMD, but what EMD is also known as an earnest money deposit or a good faith deposit. Some sellers or agents will ask for these, but all it is just it's a down payment towards the purchase price, showing how serious you are with the property. Typical EMDs are usually $1,000 to $2,000, and I like to try to negotiate my deals. It's always EMD due at the end of inspection. Sometimes agents will say EMD due within 48 hours of signed contract. Just make sure when you do wire the EMD, if the deal doesn't work, make sure you back out before the inspection period is over. Because once that inspection period is over, your EMD is gone. All right, going into the next term, this is pretty self-explanatory. LTR, MTR, STR, also known as long-term rental, mid-term rental, or short-term rental. When buyers ask for this, when wholesalers ask for this, they're simply just asking what the property is going to rent out is a regular rental, as a midterm rental, or a short-term rental, such as like an Airbnb or something of that caliber. Pretty self-explanatory. That's all the terms, guys. If I missed something, just let me know. I'll make a video about it. But that's pretty much all you'll need to know to get started. That's it for this video, guys. See you in the next lesson.